your presence will unavoidably have an impact on your children, but that's okay because it's part of a whole and it's no coincidence they're here.
C'est ça.
Donc, je dirais que pour que ça se passe au mieux,
For it
il faut
to go as smoothly as possible, you need to
se connaître.
know yourself.
Vous faites son mieux, bien sûr.
And we all do our best, of course, all of us.
On s'observe.
We observe ourselves, and actually to have children,
D'avoir des enfants ou même d'être en couple, en fait, ça
or
a
even
un effet miroir qui
just
va
to be
faire
in a
qu'on va
relationship, will have a mirroring effect that will help us realize lots of things.
On peut pas être,
We can't
comment dire, on peut pas être neutre. Ça, c'est
we
sûr.
can't be neutral, that's for
Mais,
sure.
la seule chose que,
But the only thing is,
qui me paraît évident
what's
et important
obvious
de
to
dire,
me and
c'est
important
que
to point out is that
fondamentalement,
fundamentally,
la base
the
de
basis
toutes
of
les
all
problématiques
human
humaines
problematics
vient,
comes from the
du
sense of
sentiment de
lacking
manque d'amour.
love.
Tout à l'heure, je parlais du sentiment de
I was
séparation, c'est la
talking
même
about the
chose, en
sense
fait.
of separation earlier, and that's the same
Si
thing, actually.
l'enfant
If a
se
child
sent aimé,
feels loved,
après le
the
reste,
rest,
c'est un peu,
well, it's
le
it's
reste, c'est
kind
la
of a
cerise sur le
cherry on
gâteau,
a
mais c'est pas le
cake,
gâteau, quoi.
but it's
Le
not the
gâteau, c'est
cake.
vraiment
The
que
cake really
l'enfant,
is that the
s'il
child
se
feels
sent aimé.
loved.
S'il se sent
If they
aimé,
feel loved,
s'il sent que
loved
tel qu'il est, il est aimé
exactly as they are,
inconditionnellement. Et ça,
and
normalement,
conditionally,
enfin,
and that
normalement,
is,
c'est
well,
quelque chose d'assez naturel, en fait,
that's
parce que
quite
ça,
natural, actually.
c'est pas
It's not
égotique.
egotistic.
Tous les
All
animaux,
animals,
apparemment, il y a peut-être
well,
forcément, il va y
there's
avoir des
got
exceptions, parce que dans
to be an
la
exception
conscience,
because
il y a toujours des exceptions. Mais,
consciousness always creates exceptions. But
tu vois,
let's
une
say
feuille
a
vis-à-vis de ses
hen and her
poussins, ou,
chicks,
enfin,
or any other
n'importe quel
animal,
animal va prendre soin
will take
de sa
care of their
progéniture, et c'est
offsprings.
spontané et c'est inconditionnel.
And that's spontaneous and
Même chez les
unconditional.
insectes, il y a ça.
Happens even with insects.
Donc,
So
ça,
it's
c'est pas de l'ordre de l'ego, ça. C'est automatiquement, c'est
it's
la
not related
présence
to the
qui,
ego. It's happening
qui
automatically. It's
fait ça.
simply
Donc,
presence acting.
si on arrive
So
à
if we
se laisser
can
porter
let
par ça,
ourselves be driven by that,
l'enfant, il va
the child
sentir,
will feel
il
it.
va
They
sentir
will
qu'il est
feel
aimé
they're loved
inconditionnellement,
unconditionally. And that's
c'est tout ce
all they
dont il a
need.
besoin. Après, des fois, justement, les enfants, ce qui est
Sometimes,
intéressant, c'est que ça
though,
va
what's
questionner
interesting
nos
with
principes,
having children is that it's going to
les
question our
valeurs, des
principles,
choses
our
que l'on pense
values, things
comme
we
étant
consider
hyper
very important,
importantes, et
and
tout ça,
will
on va se rendre compte que
sometimes come
finalement,
to
c'est pas tout à fait
realize
ça.
that maybe it isn't.
Et puis, moi, ce que
Also,
je dirais, c'est
I would
d'être à
suggest
l'écoute
to
aussi
listen to them
de
the
l'enfant,
same
de la même façon
way
qu'on est à
we listen
l'écoute
to
d'un adulte,
adults,
de pas se
and
mettre
to
sur un
not put
piédestal parce
ourselves on
qu'on
a
est adulte.
pedestal
Nous,
simply
on est
because we are
censé
adults
savoir la
and
vie
we're
et vivre,
supposed to know about
d'être
life and
sur
not
une
the
écoute
child, but
égale,
rather to be on
et
an
puis
equal listening and to
laisser
let the child follow
l'enfant
their
suivre ses
drive
élans
of
de
curiosity.
curiosité,
Let the
laisser
child
l'enfant
follow
suivre
their
son enthousiasme.
enthusiasm.
Et même,
I
je
would
dirais
even
même
say,
si
if
c'est
at
possible
all
pour nous, si
possible
on a
for us, if
l'élan,
the
de
drive is
l'accompagner aussi
there,
dans ses
to
passions.
accompany them in the
Évidemment, je
passion.
parle pas de
Obviously, I'm
child
not
qui va se
talking
mettre en
about
danger.
them being in harm's way.
S'il y a
If
du
there's
danger,
danger,
effectivement, le rôle
parents are
du
meant
parent,
to
c'est pas de
preserve
préserver
them
du danger.
from it.
Mais,
But
tout ce qui
everything
enthousiasme
that
un
infuses them,
enfant, on le laisse
we let
suivre
them
ce
follow
courant-là,
that
parce qu'en fait,
flow,
ça, c'est aussi la
because
conscience absolue
right there, that's also
qui
absolute
s'émerveille
consciousness,
et
which marvels and
qui joue,
plays
qui
and gets
passionne pour
passionate
plein de
about
sujets
vast
très,
amounts
très
of
vastes.
subjects.
Et des fois,
And
en tant
sometimes,
qu'adulte, on a des
as
principes,
adults, we
genre,
have principles like
cette musique-là, c'est pas bien,
this music isn't proper,
ou je sais pas, ou tel
or this
sujet, c'est
subject
pas
isn't
bien,
good.
c'est un
It's not
sujet,
a,
je sais pas comment dire,
how can I put it?
c'est pas un sujet
It's
qui est
not
intéressant,
interesting.
et en fait,
But actually,
si pour la
yes,
conscience
it is
absolue,
to absolute consciousness.
tout est intéressant,
Everything's
tout est intéressant,
interesting.
tout
Everything
est
is
digne
valuable.
d'intérêt.
It's
Et,
worthy of interest.
si votre enfant il se passionne pour les
And
camions
if your
poubelles,
child gets passionate about
allez à
garbage
fond dans le
trucks,
sujet des camions
dive
poubelles.
fully into the
Il y a
subjects.
des- tant que-
As long as
tant qu'il y
there's
a la passion,
passion, it's okay.
voilà,
It's
c'est
okay.
Ouais. Et plus, j'allais dire,
I was
plus
going to
le
say, the more
travail
deeply the
des
adults
adultes qui accompagnent les
accompanying
enfants
children work on themselves, the more it comes down to the essential, the more echo there is in the child, because what's essential in us is what's essential in them. So understanding will become more and more harmonious, clear, fluent, and usually everything gets easier because there's a genuine listening, but at a truly deep level, which doesn't prevent, if needed be, to put your foot down. That can happen also. But most of all, what's important is that parents shouldn't feel guilty because they're doing the best where they are in their way of apprehending contact, exchange, education, etc. with their child. They do their best. They can't do it any other way. Can be tricky sometimes, of course. Sometimes they're a bit authoritative, sometimes too violent, sometimes a bit too lenient. It's never easy. They do their best. But I reckon what's important is to work on ourselves, to be deeply introspective, because that's where we get in touch with the child that we are, meaning that thing that's unchanging. And children are still within that, so inevitably that there's a recognition happening, and that's where a true, genuine encounter will happen, authentic and earnest. In any case, a child feels immediately if we're not truthful, authentic, sincere, and comes a moment where communication becomes chaotic. It's unavoidable, and consciousness through that child will point out where there's an imbalance in the adult. So it is, so to speak, in your best interest to do that deep inner introspection to be able to understand the child more clearly, where they're at. That's when it's going to become smoother, truly. Smoothness doesn't happen through the mind, it happens through the heart and with empathy. And what I became aware of is, because I have a son, is that actually a child never has tantrums. We use that word a lot, you're having a tantrum, etc. A child doesn't have tantrums. The truth is, we're the ones not understanding them. And I'm not trying to guilt people by saying that. It's not about guilting anyone. But in fact, if we understood, they wouldn't react like that. We keep coming back to the same thing. They do things that may seem strange, that would be labeled as silly, etc., to find that bond of love again. Let's put it that way. And to a child, love is even more important than physical food. It's truly the most important thing. That's it. When we are in the heart and empathetic, it's really simple. It's not about method or a mindset. It's just a question of empathy. And it's only by introspection that we can really, the more we listen to ourselves, the more we listen to others, the more we understand ourselves, the more we understand others. But again, no need to feel guilty. It's okay. We are where we are and we do our best. That's for sure. Absolutely. Something else that's interesting regarding children is when we feel bad about the way we raise our children, often we resent something that was done to us by our parents. There's a sort of transgenerational pattern in the education that we'll become aware of with the child. We'll realize that there are things we do that were done to us. Sometimes we even reproduce things we didn't like to undergo ourselves. As it happened when we were children, it becomes written in the subconscious. And then again, it's another way to notice and be conscious of lots of things. Those are patterns. Patterns can repeat themselves. Reason why Pierre and I were saying the deeper the introspection is going, the less we'll repeat those, among other things, the less we'll do it ourselves. My mom went through periods where, because she's been a persecuted child, truly persecuted, she's been beaten and battered, horrendous things were done to her. Well, she's never done that to me, never, ever. But from time to time, she would have reflexes of violence to try and stop something that was she couldn't appease a situation, but very quickly, because she was in a very deep introspection, she told herself, no, I can't keep going that way. Violence is absolutely worthless, doesn't lead anywhere. So there was a true awareness there, and she didn't keep on with the pattern. And that's it. That's very important. We sometimes think, well, I'm not a parent myself, but I see things all the same. So we think that as parents, somehow we have to take actions that will unavoidably be a punishment, a slap on the face or a spanking, etc. And we believe that there's no other way because we want to put an end to the situation quickly because we feel overwhelmed. That's false. That's a belief. Reason why we say the more we know ourselves inwardly, the closer we get to the quote-unquote state of what the child is in depth, the less those kind of conflicts will appear, and the more obvious it'll become to talk with them, to share with them, to follow them in their interests, in their sensitivity, and less violence there is. Even the patterns we got from our parents or even grandparents, etc., there's no more drive to follow them. It's over, and things start to unfold. There's a gentleness settling in. And inevitably the child feels it, even if they're angry at that moment or don't want to go to sleep or don't want to eat. That will feel still fair to them. It will be obvious to them. And the tension will pass pretty quickly. These states a bit complex for them when caught up in a reaction. Well, it will disappear very quickly because the child can see that their parents are very much present. Children feel a lot. We take them for ignorant, but the child feels a lot, and they know when their mother or father are truly aligned, accurate, and that all is good. The mirroring effect is often more intense with children. People told me during private discussions things like, my child never listens to me, etc. And every time I would ask the question, what about you? Are you really listening to them? Every time people tell me no. So inevitably, if you're not listening, they're not going to listen either. Or a child who screams all the time, I always ask them, what about you? Are you always speaking calmly? And actually, they aren't. They're always speaking loudly, screaming. It is truly a mirror effect. It's interesting. But on the other hand, children are also born with tendencies. Part of it comes from past lives. It's not up to us. There are some children with some sort of anger that has been there since their birth because it dates to prior. So same here, we just accompany them the best we can. We do our best. We truly do our best. Once again, I repeat that the most important part is for them to feel loved. All the rest is the cherry on the cake, but that's really not the most important. And to remind parents that guilt is useless, because often parents ask, have I been a good father? Have I been a good mother? I've heard that a lot. Even my own mother herself asked me, have I been a good mother? And she asked me that. Yes, because you're doing your best at that moment, given the situation. You don't have other tools. You don't know how to apprehend things, and you act as you act. And as you go along, you realize things, you become more conscious of things, and it changes, and it settles down, and everything becomes obvious for everyone. But it's not always easy in the beginning. You need to have faith. And to wrap it up, because there's a lot of people currently on the spiritual path who will listen to this, do not try and force your children to be on a spiritual path or to meditate or have spiritual practices. Even traditionally among rishis, the first sages of humanity, or even in yogic traditions, back when relationships between master and disciples were pretty intense. So in gurukulas, master schools, where you went to get spiritual teachings, it could start at 12-year-old. Before 12, we didn't talk about that to any of the children. So there's no need to force children to do anything. And truly we mean nothing. We're just giving an example for the spiritual path. But it also applies to clothes, food, games with friends. We're just here to keep an ear out and be aware if something seems to happen, check if there maybe might appear as a danger, then okay, we can then act accordingly. But parents are not here to force their children to follow a specific path with a specific structure. Children come here to experience certain things. It's important to know that.